She slapped me at my engagement over $60,000. But what happened next shocked everyone.
When I think back to that night, my chest still tightens as if the air has been stolen from me all over again. My engagement was supposed to be the happiest moment of my life. The kind of night a little girl dreams of when she pictures her wedding dress. The music, the laughter, the faces of family glowing with pride. For a while, it was exactly that. Bright lights, champagne glasses clinking, the warm hum of voices wrapping around me like a blanket. I remember feeling like my future was finally here, like all the sacrifices I had made were worth it. I thought I had stepped into the moment where my life would change forever, but not in the way I expected. I had worked so hard for that wedding fund. Every shift I took, every late night, every dollar carefully tucked away, it all became that number, $60,000. It wasn't just money to me. It was years of saying no to myself so I could say yes to the future I wanted. Vacations with friends? Skipped. New clothes when mine were worn thin? Ignored. Even small pleasures like dinners out, I pushed them away. People called me disciplined. Others teased me for being too serious. But I held on to that dream because I wanted one thing: to walk down the aisle debt-free, to start my marriage without chains around my ankles. That night, I looked at my fiancé and thought, this is it. All the nights of sacrifice had finally led here. The guests were laughing, my cousins dancing, the DJ playing music that seemed to carry joy through every corner of the room. For just a few shining minutes, I allowed myself to feel safe, to believe that my family was proud of me, that they were happy for me. But then everything twisted. It started so suddenly that it almost didn't feel real. My sister cornered me near the table, her face flushed, her eyes burning with a kind of desperation I had never seen before. She asked, no, demanded, that I hand over my wedding fund to her. $60,000, just like that. She said she needed it, that it wasn't fair for me to keep it all to myself when she was struggling. At first, I laughed nervously, thinking maybe she was joking. But her face told me she wasn't. I told her no, firmly but still gently, because she was my sister, and I didn't want to embarrass her in front of everyone. But my refusal only lit a fire in her eyes. Her voice grew sharper, louder, pulling people's attention from across the room. It's just money, she snapped, as though the years of sacrifice meant nothing, as though the blood, sweat, and tears I had poured into building my future were worth no more than loose change tossed into her palm. And then came my mother. She stepped into the circle of noise, her presence always commanding, but this time it was different. Her voice was cold, steady, carrying an authority that left no room for argument. She looked at me, not as her daughter, not as the woman she had raised, but as an obstacle standing in the way of what she had already decided should happen. You will give it to her, she said. No warmth, no love, just an order. My heart pounded. I could feel the stares of everyone around us, their curiosity sharp, their judgment hanging heavy in the air. My mind screamed at me to stay calm, but my body trembled with disbelief. I shook my head. I couldn't give in. That money was my life's work, my dream, my future. The silence that followed was unbearable. Every second stretched like a rope pulled tighter and tighter until it snapped. And then she did it. My mother's hand came down across my face with a sound so sharp it silenced the entire room. For a moment, I couldn't even process it. My cheek burned, my ears rang, and my heart stopped in shock. This wasn't just discipline. This wasn't just anger. This was betrayal. Gasps erupted around us. Some guests turned away, Others stared wide-eyed, frozen in place. I looked at my fiancé, desperate for comfort, for someone to say, "This isn't right." But he just stood there, his face pale, his eyes darting between us, as if he didn't know whose side he was supposed to be on. And in that moment, surrounded by everyone I loved, I had never felt more alone. Whispers spread through the crowd. Words like selfish, ungrateful, stubborn, slipped through the air like poison. My sister's lips curled into a smile so faint it was almost invisible. But I saw it. I felt it. This wasn't desperation. This was victory. She had wanted this moment. She had wanted to see me broken, humiliated, forced to my knees. My mother's eyes were cold, harder than I had ever seen them. She stood firm, her voice like stone when she spoke again. "If you walk away from this family, don't bother coming back." I couldn't breathe. The walls of the hall seemed to close in on me, the music long gone, replaced by the deafening thud of my heartbeat. I was cornered. Give up everything I had worked for, or lose the only family I had ever known. And that's when I realized. The slap wasn't the end. It was the beginning. What none of us knew was that the betrayal ran deeper than that single night. What I would discover in the hours and days to come would shake me to my core, revealing secrets I had never imagined my own family was capable of keeping. That night wasn't just about a slap. It was about uncovering the truth, and the truth was far darker than I ever expected. When I got home that night, I sat in the dark for hours, staring at my reflection in the window. My cheek still throbbed where her hand had landed, but the physical sting was nothing compared to the storm inside me. The echo of her words, "Don't bother coming back," kept circling in my head, wrapping tighter every time, like a rope I couldn't untangle. I wanted to believe it was just anger, just heat of the moment rage, the kind that would blow over in a day or two. But deep down, I knew better. That wasn't a mother losing her temper. That was a mother making a choice. And she didn't choose me. The next morning, my phone buzzed non-stop. Calls, messages, notifications piling up like evidence against me. Friends asking what happened. Relatives whispering, "Why didn't you just give the money? It's only family." And then there was my sister, her voice in a string of messages, each one more venomous than the last. She said I ruined her life, that I was selfish, that I would regret this. She even told me that Mum was right, that maybe I wasn't really part of the family anymore. I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Instead, I scrolled back to one message that stopped me cold. It wasn't from my sister, or from my cousins. It was from an uncle, one who usually kept quiet during family drama. His words were short, but they burned. They planned this. You should check your accounts before it's too late. My stomach dropped. My fingers trembled as I logged into my bank. And there it was. Attempts. Repeated attempts to access my wedding account, like hands reaching through the screen to take what was mine. They hadn't succeeded yet, but they were trying. My mother and sister weren't just angry. They weren't just disappointed. They were prepared to rob me. I couldn't stop shaking. All those years of sacrifice, every dollar I had guarded so carefully, they had been circling like vultures, is waiting for the chance to swoop in and tear it away. And worse, they believed they had the right to do it. I felt sick. I couldn't eat, couldn't think. My fiancé tried to calm me, but he seemed distant, unsure. His words were soft, but empty, like he was trying to smooth things over without really choosing a side. And in my heart, I knew why. He had seen the power my family held, the way they could turn a room against me in an instant. Maybe he thought silence was safer. Maybe he thought if he didn't speak, he couldn't lose. But I had already lost. Days passed, and the silence from my mother grew heavier. No apologies. No explanation. Just silence. Until one evening, a letter arrived in the mail. My name written in her handwriting. So familiar it twisted my stomach into knots. I opened it, hoping, just for a moment, that it might be an olive branch, a chance to mend what had broken. It wasn't. Inside were words that cut deeper than the slap ever could. She wrote that I had betrayed her, that I had turned my back on the family. She said my refusal to give my sister the money proved I cared more about myself than anyone else. But then, as I read further, the tone shifted. She wrote about duty, about protecting what was ours, about standing firm against change. At first, I didn't understand. But as the sentences continued, I felt my blood run cold. It wasn't just about money. It was about people. About the neighbors who had left our community over the years. The families I remembered packing their trucks in the dead of night. She spoke of them like they were invaders, like it was her mission to keep the neighborhood safe. And suddenly, the pieces clicked together. This wasn't just greed. This was hate. My mother hadn't just slapped me because of money. She had been part of something bigger, something darker. The reason she wanted the money for my sister wasn't Joe, and because my sister needed it. It was because they believed in a legacy, one built on exclusion, on keeping people out, on pushing them away. I dropped the letter onto the floor, my hands trembling so violently I could barely breathe. My whole body felt hollow, like I was standing on a cliff edge I hadn't even known existed. The family I thought I knew, the people I thought I could trust, had been hiding something from me for years. And now, by refusing them, I had uncovered it. Fear crawled over me like a shadow. If they were willing to humiliate me in public, to steal from me, to cast me out, what else were they capable of? Who else was part of this? Was it just my mother and sister? Or were there others, watching, waiting, ready to silence me if I spoke out? That night, I locked every door, every window. I sat with the letter on the table in front of me, the words blurring as tears stung my eyes. I felt like I was living in two worlds, the one where I was just a bride-to-be planning her future, and the one where I had uncovered a secret so poisonous it threatened to destroy me. I wanted to burn the letter, to erase every word of it. But I couldn't. Because destroying it would mean destroying the truth of what those families endured, the ones who had been forced out quietly, the ones who had never spoken up. Keeping it meant carrying a weight I wasn't sure I could bear. And as I sat there in the dark, the question tore at me over and over. What am I supposed to do with this? Because the slap was no longer the worst part of the story. The worst part was realizing that my mother hadn't just betrayed me. She had betrayed everyone who ever called our neighborhood home. And now, whether I liked it or not, I was part of it too. For days, I carried that letter with me like a curse. I folded it and unfolded it, traced the handwriting, tried to convince myself that maybe I was misunderstanding her words. But every time my eyes moved across the page, the meaning grew clearer, heavier, more undeniable. My mother wasn't turned to just protecting my sister. She was protecting an idea, a twisted vision of what belonged and who didn't. I started to remember things I had ignored. Families who used to live just a few houses down, gone overnight. The Johnsons, the Garcias, the Woos. I used to wave to them as a kid, play in their yards, share cookies across fences. But one by one, they disappeared. And I told myself it was coincidence. Jobs, relocations, life pulling people away. Now I realized it hadn't been chance. It had been deliberate. and my own family had been part of it. The weight of that truth sat heavy on my chest. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep. Every sound outside made me jump. Every knock at the door sent a chill through my veins. Because if my mother left me that letter, it meant she trusted me with the knowledge. But trust wasn't the right word, was it? No. She expected me to agree with her, to carry on what she had started. The thought made me sick. One night, I sat at the kitchen table with the letter spread out in front of me, the clock ticking loudly in the silence. I tried to imagine what would happen if I told someone, if I handed the letter to the police or a reporter, or even just a friend. But then I imagined the fallout. My mother finding out. My sister. The neighbors who might be in on it. Would they come after me? Would I be silenced the same way those families had been pushed out? Fear wrapped around me like a second skin. I started locking every door, checking every window twice before bed. I pulled the curtains shut tight, afraid of who might be watching from outside. My phone buzzed constantly with messages from family, some of them pleading, others laced with venom. My sister's words grew uglier, darker, as if she knew I was holding on to something that could expose them all. One night, I found a note slipped under my door. No envelope, no name, just 4 words written in messy handwriting. Keep quiet, or else. I froze, the paper trembling in my hands. My stomach churned, bile rising in my throat. Someone knew, someone was warning me, or threatening me, and in that moment, I understood just how deep this ran. It wasn't just my mother and my sister. There were others, people who believed in the same poison, who would do anything to keep it hidden. I shoved the note into the same box where I kept the letter, locking it tight. But my hands wouldn't stop shaking. I sat awake the entire night, staring into the dark, every creak of the house sounding like footsteps, every shadow looking like someone standing just out of sight. The next morning, my fiancé tried to talk to me, but his words fell flat. He wanted me to let it go, to focus on our future, to not get tangled in family matters that couldn't be changed. His calm tone only made me angrier. He didn't understand, or maybe he didn't want to, because if he admitted what was happening, then he'd have to choose, and like everyone else, he chose silence. It hurt more than I can explain, realizing that the person I thought would stand beside me through everything couldn't even stand with me now. I felt abandoned, cornered on all sides, by my family, by my fiancé, by the shadows pressing closer each day. And then, one evening, the box was moved. I had kept it tucked away in the closet, buried under blankets, the key hidden where no one should have found it. But when I went to check, it wasn't where I left it. My heart slammed against my ribs as I tore through the closet, tossing clothes and boxes aside. Finally, I found it. Sitting on the floor, slightly ajar, as if someone had touched it. I knelt there, my breath ragged, scanning the room for signs of intrusion. The windows were locked, the doors secured, no signs of forced entry. But the box had been opened. I flipped through the papers, checking, counting, desperate to make sure nothing was missing. The letter was still there, the note still tucked beside it. But the air felt wrong, like someone had stood in that room, touched what wasn't theirs, and left just enough behind to remind me, "We see you." I slammed the box shut, locked it, and held it against my chest, rocking back and forth on the floor like a child trying to soothe herself. Tears poured down my face, hot and relentless, because the truth was clear now. They weren't just trying to take my money. They were watching me. They were reminding me that I wasn't safe. Not in my home, not in my skin, not in the future I thought I was building. Every night after that, I sat awake, clutching the box, my eyes glued to the shadows outside my window. My body was exhausted, my mind unraveling, but I couldn't close my eyes. Because what if they came back? What if next time they didn't just move the box? What if they took it? What if they took me? And as the nights dragged on, a chilling thought crept into my mind, one that refused to let go. Maybe that slap at my engagement wasn't the worst thing my family was capable of. Maybe it was just the warning I didn't tell anyone about the box being moved. Not my fiancé, not a friend, not even a whisper online. I couldn't risk it. If they knew I noticed, if they realized I was aware, I was certain they would strike harder. So I played dumb, even as my insides twisted like rope pulled too tight. I smiled when people asked how I was. I laughed when my fiancé tried to lighten the mood. But inside, every nerve in me was screaming. And then my sister called. Her voice was sharp, not the teasing tone she used to have when we were kids, but something colder, more deliberate. She said, "You're making things harder than they need to be. Mom trusted you, but maybe she was wrong." I tried to keep my voice steady, but my hand shook so badly I nearly dropped the phone. I asked her what she meant, asked why she was saying that, but she only laughed, low, bitter, and said, "You know exactly what I mean. You have something that doesn't belong to you, and if you were smart, you'd get rid of it." My blood ran cold. She knew. She knew about the box, about the letter. She was warning me, or threatening me. Either way, the walls were closing in. I hung up before she could say more, but my chest was heaving, my breath ragged. I felt like I was choking on air. That night, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I told my fiancé everything. The letter, the note, the box being moved. I poured it all out, my words stumbling over themselves, desperate for him to believe me. He sat there in silence, his jaw tight, his eyes narrowing, and when I finished, he shook his head. "Alec," he said softly, "you're imagining things. You're grieving, you're tired, and you're letting paranoia eat you alive. Maybe your sister's just being dramatic. Maybe you misplaced the box yourself. You can't keep doing this. You'll lose your mind." It felt like he had slapped me all over again. He didn't believe me. He thought I was breaking apart, seeing ghosts where there were none. And maybe I wanted to believe he was right. Maybe I wanted to think I was imagining it. But deep down, I knew better. The fear in my bones wasn't paranoia. It was instinct. Days later, I found another note. This one wasn't slipped under the door. It was taped to my car windshield. My heart stopped when I saw it, fluttering in the breeze. 4 new words, in the same messy handwriting. "Last chance, Alec." I ripped it off, my hands trembling so badly I could barely read. My chest burned, my stomach churned. I knew what it meant. I was running out of time. That evening, as the sun sank, painting the sky in streaks of red, I sat on my couch with the box in front of me. My hands hovered over it, shaking. I couldn't keep it anymore. I couldn't. Every second it stayed with me, the danger grew louder, closer, more suffocating. But what would happen if I destroyed it? Would that stop them? Or would it seal my fate? My phone buzzed. Another message from my sister. "We warned you. Don't. Test us." Something inside me snapped. I grabbed the box, clutching it to my chest, and ran to my bedroom. My fiancé shouted after me, confused, but I ignored him. I locked the door, sat on the floor, and held it tight, rocking back and forth as tears streamed down my face. I whispered to myself, over and over, I didn't ask for this. I didn't want this. But the weight in my arms reminded me, wanting didn't matter. This was mine now, whether I chose it or not. The nights grew unbearable. I barely slept, every creak of the house making me flinch. Once, I swore I saw a figure standing across the street, half hidden in the shadows, watching. I blinked, and it was gone. But the fear stayed. Then came the worst night of all. I woke to the sound of footsteps in the hallway. Slow, heavy. Not my fiancé. He was snoring beside me. My blood turned to ice. I sat up, straining to hear, every muscle in my body rigid. The steps stopped right outside our bedroom door. Silence. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. My eyes locked on the doorknob, waiting, praying it wouldn't turn. And then, scratch. A sound like nails dragging across wood. My whole body shook, tears spilling down my cheeks. I wanted to scream, but the sound died in my throat. And then, nothing. The steps retreated. The silence swallowed me whole again. When the sun finally rose, I unlocked the door and ran through the house, desperate to find proof. But there was nothing. No footprints, no signs of entry. Just the lingering terror that someone had been there, standing inches away, reminding me, you're never safe. I collapsed onto the floor, sobbing, clutching the box like it was the only thing tethering me to reality. Because maybe it was. Maybe this evidence, this truth, was the only reason I was still breathing, because they hadn't decided what to do with me yet. But deep down, I knew this wasn't going to end. With notes or slaps or warnings, it was building towards something else, something final, and I couldn't shake the question that gnawed at me, even in my most fragile moments. When the end came, would anyone believe me, or would they bury the truth along with me? I kept telling myself I could hold on a little longer, that somehow the storm would pass if I just stayed quiet, if I just kept my head down. But deep inside, I knew the storm wasn't passing. It was circling closer, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when it did, it would not leave me standing. It was 3 nights later when everything broke. The house was still. My fiancé had left to stay at his brother's after another argument about me making myself sick with paranoia. He said he couldn't take the constant tension anymore. He said I needed help, not more secrets. I watched him leave, and part of me shattered, because even he couldn't understand what was happening to me. I was alone, completely alone. The hours dragged on until the sky outside the window turned black. I sat at the kitchen table with the metal box in front of me, the weight of it pressing into the wood like it was carving scars into the surface. My hands hovered over it, then pulled back, then hovered again. I wanted to open it one last time, to search for answers, for something that could explain why my husband had done this, why my family wanted it so badly, why strangers were now circling me like predators. But the truth was, I was terrified of what I might find. And then the power went out. The entire house dropped into darkness. The hum of the refrigerator died, the soft glow of the lamps blinked out, and the silence that followed was suffocating. My chest seized, my heart pounding so loud I could hear it in my ears. And then, Footsteps. Not upstairs, not outside. Inside. Slow, careful, deliberate. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. My eyes darted toward the doorway. A shadow moved, stretching across the flue, tall and unmistakable. Someone was in the house. I wanted to scream, to run, but my legs wouldn't move. I was rooted in place, my body refusing to obey me. The shadow lingered, growing larger, closer, until finally a figure appeared in the doorway. It was my sister. Her face was hard, cold, lit faintly by the moonlight slipping through the window. She didn't say a word. She didn't need to. Her eyes locked onto the box, and I knew this was what she had come for. "Alec," she finally whispered, her voice like venom. "Give it to me. You don't understand what you're holding." My throat was dry, my lips trembling. "What is this?" I whispered back. "Why is it worth destroying me for?" Her jaw tightened. She took a step closer, then another. "You don't want the answer to that. You want to survive. Just give me the box." Every muscle in me screamed to obey, to throw it into her hands and end this nightmare. But something deeper, something raw and unyielding, rose up inside me. I shook my head. "No," I said, my voice cracking but firm. "This isn't yours. It never was." Her eyes blazed, and for a moment I thought she might lunge at me. She reached out, her fingers curling as if ready to grab the box by force. But then a noise broke the tension, a creak on the stairs. Another set of footsteps. I spun, my heart racing, and there, another figure appeared, not my fiancé, not a stranger, my mother. The air drained from my lungs. The two of them stood before me, their faces shadowed, their eyes locked on me with a coldness I had never known. My mother's voice was steady, but deadly. "You don't belong to yourself anymore, Alec. This family made you. This family owns you. That box is ours. Give it up, or you will regret it." I felt like the walls were caving in. My mother, my sister, people who had raised me, loved me, or at least pretended to, now standing united against me. And me alone, clutching a box full of secrets I didn't ask for. Tears streamed down my cheeks, my chest heaving as I whispered, "No, I won't. Not anymore." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's face twisted in rage, my sister's fists clenched at her sides. For a heartbeat, I thought they might attack me right then and there. And then my sister lunged. I screamed, holding the box tight against me as she tore at my arms, her nails digging into my skin. My mother shouted, her voice sharp and furious, and the three of us collapsed to the floor, the box crashing between us. Papers scattered, photographs sliding across the tiles, evidence spilling into the open. And in that chaos, I saw it. Faces, names, records of families driven out, people targeted and hurt, all catalogued in my husband's handwriting. The truth, undeniable, lying bare for all of us to see. My sister froze, her eyes scanning the papers. My mother grabbed at them desperately, trying to shove them back into the box. But I pushed her hand away. "This is what you've been hiding," I sobbed. "This is what you've destroyed me for." My sister's face twisted, torn between shock and fury. She shouted, "You don't understand what you're doing. You're going to ruin everything." And then the front door slammed open. A voice boomed through the darkness. My fiancé, calling my name. He had come back. He flicked on his phone's flashlight, the beam cutting through tea. He chaos to reveal us on the floor, the box open, the papers everywhere. His eyes widened as he took it all in. The betrayal, the violence, the evidence scattered like shattered glass. I froze, my breath ragged, my heart screaming inside my chest. Because in that single moment, I realized the truth couldn't be hidden anymore. Not from him. Not from anyone. And as my mother and sister turned their cold, furious eyes toward me, I knew I had crossed a line that could never be uncrossed.
She slapped me at my engagement over $60,000. But what happened next shocked everyone.
The night had an edge to it, sharp and unrelenting, like it was alive and breathing. The streets were unusually quiet, yet every shadow seemed to move with intent. Something was off from the very first step outside. The streetlights flickered as if signaling a warning, and a cold shiver ran down my spine. I could sense eyes everywhere, though no one was visible. The feeling was unbearable, a presence that was stalking, watching, waiting. Each step I took echoed too loudly in the empty alleyways, as if announcing my existence to whoever was out there. Then came the first sign, an abandoned note tucked under a street drain, soaked with rain. It read only, "You can't run." The ink smudged, but the threat was clear. I looked around, heart pounding, scanning every dark corner, every doorway. Nothing moved, yet I felt the gaze of someone far too close. That was when I noticed the first strange detail: footprints leading from the note toward the main road, then abruptly disappearing into the shadows. Someone wanted me to follow or to panic. Either way, it worked. My instincts screamed to leave, but something inside demanded answers. I traced the path, careful not to make noise, and found another clue, a small photograph, torn at the edges, showing a place I recognized, an abandoned house at the edge of the city. My hands trembled as I picked it up. Why was I being led here? Who had been following me all this time? Each answer only raised more questions. Then a sound broke the silence, a faint click, like a camera shutter. My chest tightened. Someone was recording, documenting every move I made. I ran, not in panic, but with urgency. Every corner I turned, the feeling of being followed intensified. The shadows stretched and twisted unnaturally. I finally reached a familiar street where people occasionally passed, but it was empty tonight. And there, on the pavement, another note. Soon, the handwriting matched the first. My mind raced. This was personal. Someone knew more than they should. And it was clear they had planned this meticulously. The abandoned house loomed ahead, decrepit, with shattered windows and a gate that swung with the wind. Hesitation clawed at me, but I knew ignoring it would only make things worse. As I stepped inside, the smell of damp wood and dust enveloped me. The floorboards creaked under my weight. In the center of the room, a series of objects were arranged deliberately: an old diary, photographs, a cracked mirror, and then I saw it, a single envelope, sealed, addressed to me. My fingers shook as I opened it, revealing a message that chilled me to the bone. Everything you tried to forget is coming back. I tried to leave, but the house seemed different now. Every exit felt like it had moved. The shadows weren't just shadows, they were watching. I felt trapped, but also exposed. On instinct, I grabbed the diary and started flipping through it. Each page contained memories I had long buried, moments I thought were private, now exploited. Someone had been tracking me for years. Every failure, every secret, every moment of weakness, meticulously documented. The realization hit me like a hammer. This wasn't random. This was revenge, and I was the target. Then came the sound of movements, soft, deliberate, just outside the broken windows. Someone was there, waiting, testing my fear. I could see nothing clearly, yet I knew they were studying me, learning what terrified me most. The air thickened with tension, and time slowed. My every thought screamed to run, to hide, to fight. But before I could decide, a loud crash came from the upper floor. Something or someone was inside. Heart hammering, I moved cautiously, diary clutched to my chest. Each step seemed louder than the last. The upper floor was darker, shadows pooling in every corner. And then I saw a figure shrouded, unrecognizable, standing motionless, watching. Panic surged, but my mind fought back. I needed to understand. I asked, "Who's there?" No reply, only the sound of breathing, slow and measured. Then, a whisper, "It's all your fault." The words hit like a physical blow. Every instinct screamed danger. I bolted, running down the stairs, the figure following silently. Outside, the night air felt like a lifeline. But the sense of being hunted didn't fade. Whoever was after me wasn't going away. They had prepared this, calculated it. I realized then that survival wasn't just about escaping. They wanted me to suffer, to feel fear, to be broken. I didn't stop running until I reached a more populated area. Streetlights, passing cars, people talking in the distant safety, at least temporarily. But deep down, I knew it was temporary. Whoever this was, they knew my patterns, my weaknesses, my safe places, and that meant no place was truly safe. Every step I took after that night was haunted by the certainty that I was being watched, analyzed, and hunted. The city lights blurred as I ran, my chest burning with every breath, my hands gripping the diary as if it could shield me from what was coming. But no matter how far I went, the feeling of being hunted didn't fade. It followed me like a shadow, slipping into every corner, every alley. I finally ducked into a small cafe still open, hoping the noise and people would give me some safety. I slid into a corner, my back pressed against the wall, eyes scanning every entrance, every reflection. My hands trembled, and the diary felt heavier with each second. I couldn't shake the idea that every page I had read had been planted to manipulate me, to drive me into this maze of fear. Then my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number, only 3 words, "I see you." My blood ran cold. I looked around, desperate, imagining eyes hidden behind the windows, in the shadows, recording everything. I tried calling someone, anyone, but no signal. My mind raced. How long had this been happening? How much had they planned? Every quiet moment of my life suddenly felt staged, every step observed. I realized that nothing I had done had been private, not a single thing. I stepped outside into the rain, hoping it would mask my trail, but even the storm seemed to echo my fear. The streets were deserted, the wind slicing through my coat, carrying the sound of distant footsteps, though I wasn't sure if I imagined them or if they were real. Each corner I turned revealed nothing and everything at the same time. I felt like the city itself was conspiring against me, bending shadows, moving in ways only I could sense. Then I saw a car parked under a flickering streetlight. Its engine was off, windows tinted, nothing in it that suggested threat yet. Everything about it screamed danger. My instinct screamed to keep moving, but curiosity or maybe desperation pulled me closer. On the windshield, in sloppy handwriting, were 3 words, "Check inside now." My heart thudded painfully in my chest. I circled the car, hesitant, every nerve alert. I opened the door slowly. Inside was a small box, taped shut. Inside the box was a single key and another photograph, a photograph of me sleeping, taken from somewhere inside my apartment. I froze. My apartment, my safe place, my private sanctuary, and someone had violated it. Every memory of that space, the only place I thought I could be alone, felt poisoned now. The key was small, metallic, heavy with intention. I pocketed it, knowing I had to go back. Somehow, I knew the next step was inevitable. There was no running anymore. Whoever this was, they wanted me to confront them, or at least follow the path they had set. The streets blurred as I raced home. Every shadow seemed alive, every sound amplified. I kept imagining the figure from the house, that silent, shrouded presence, appearing behind every corner. My apartment felt impossibly far, yet too close. The key in my pocket was a reminder that I couldn't avoid this, that the next stage of this nightmare was waiting for me. When I finally reached my building, I froze at the door. Nothing looked different, yet everything felt altered. I climbed the stairs slowly, heart hammering, gripping the railing like it would hold me together. Inside, my apartment was eerily quiet. I stepped in cautiously, scanning every corner. Everything seemed normal until I saw a shadow move in the corner of my living room. I gasped, heart nearly stopping. It wasn't just a shadow, it was deliberate, calculating. Then, a voice, soft and chilling, floated from the darkness. "You shouldn't have come back alone." My body froze. I couldn't see them, but I felt the air around me thicken, heavy with menace. The diary felt like it was burning in my hands. Every page I had read, every secret revealed it, all led to this moment. Panic surged, but I forced myself to move slowly, trying to appear calm, trying to read the situation, to find an edge. Any way out. A sudden click echoed from the corner of the room. Another camera, Someone was recording me again. They were enjoying this, my fear, my confusion, my desperation. My life had become a staged performance for a cruel audience I couldn't see. And then I heard a whisper from behind me. You'll understand soon. Everything you hid will be revealed. I turned, and in the dim light, I caught a glimpse of movement. Quick and calculated. Someone was watching my reaction, studying my fear, pushing me toward breaking point. I realized then that escape alone wasn't possible. This was a trap designed to draw me out, to make me act, and to exploit every weakness I had. I knew I had to think fast. The diary, the key, the photographs, all pieces of a puzzle I didn't fully understand yet. Whoever this was, they had built a web around me, one that I could see but not yet untangle. I had to stay alive, to outthink them. But every instinct screamed danger. Every shadow could be the next strike. Every sound could be the signal that they were closer than I imagined. The chapter ends with a realization that sent chills through me. This was no random attack. Someone knew me intimately, knew my habits, my fears, and my past. They had planned years of observation to lead to this exact moment, and now they were in control. Every move I made, every breath I took, could be anticipated. The only choice left was to follow the clues they had left, to step deeper into the darkness they had meticulously prepared. I didn't have time to breathe. The moment I thought I was safe, the phone buzzed in my pocket. A message flashed on the screen, short, sharp, and chilling. You're not alone. Watch closely. My hands shook as I scrolled, my heart hammering against my ribs. I didn't recognize the number, but the words cut through me like ice. I glanced around my small apartment. The shadows seemed heavier, closer, almost waiting. I had already locked the door, bolted the windows, and yet I felt watched. Every sound made me jump. A car door slamming outside, a distant footstep echoing in the stairwell, the fridge humming too loudly. I tried to reason with myself. It's probably just someone messing with me. A prank, a coincidence. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. The way the message knew my exact location, my exact movements, the way it played with my fear, it wasn't random. Someone had been studying me. Someone knew me. The first rule in situations like this, I reminded myself, was to track the patterns. I opened my laptop, checking my security cameras, online accounts, recent activity. Nothing unusual, nothing that could give away a trail. And yet, the feeling of eyes on me didn't leave. My chest tightened as the memory of last night's shadows came back, the flicker of movement outside my window, the soft whisper of a figure slipping into the alley below. I couldn't stay paralyzed. Panic would only make me a target. I grabbed my coat, my keys, and a flashlight. Even though the sun was just rising, I needed to check the alley. Step by step, I crept down the stairwell, careful not to make a sound. My mind raced with every possible scenario. A stalker, an obsessed ex, someone sent by a stranger with a grudge. Every step I took, my imagination multiplied the danger. And yet, I couldn't stop. I had to see. I had to confirm it for myself. As I reached the alley, a cold gust of wind made me shiver. Trash bins rattled, and the loose papers danced across the concrete. At first, I saw nothing. Then a flash, a movement at the corner of my eye. I spun, shining my flashlight toward it, heart in my throat. Nothing. Just shadows. Just my reflection in a dark window. I laughed nervously at myself, telling myself I was imagining things, overreacting. Then the sound came, a soft thud, deliberate, almost like a signal. I froze. Someone was here, and they weren't hiding. They were letting me know they were aware. My pulse spiked. I thought of calling the police, but I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of knowing how scared I was. I had to be smarter. I had to be faster. I decided to track the evidence quietly. Footprints in the damp alley, scraps of paper blown into corners, a faint smell of cigarette smoke lingering near a dumpster. Small details, almost invisible to anyone else, but to me, they were pieces of a puzzle. And puzzles, no matter how complex, could be solved. I followed each clue carefully, heart hammering, flashlight shaking in my hand. Each step I took, I whispered to myself, stay calm, don't panic, watch closely. Hours passed, or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell anymore. The city seemed to blur, a haze of light and shadow, and every turn of my head felt like it might reveal the predator. Then, at the far end of the alley, I saw it, a small envelope, taped to a dumpster. I approached slowly, knowing that each second could be my last. The envelope was unmarked, except for one word written in jagged letters, C. Inside, a photograph, my apartment building, my window, and me. The image was recent. My hands trembled as I dropped the envelope, my mind screaming with every terrifying possibility. Someone had been inside my home. Someone had been watching me for days, weeks, maybe longer. And now, they were sending proof that I wasn't safe, that I was their target. I ran back to my apartment, heart pounding like a drum. I locked the door, checked every corner, every closet, every window. I barricaded myself in my bedroom, breathing hard, tears stinging my eyes. I knew sleep was impossible. Rest was impossible. I had to plan, to anticipate, to survive. Every instinct screamed at me that this was just the beginning. Whoever this was, they weren't stopping until they'd broken me completely or worse. As night fell, my phone buzzed again. A new message. Short, cold, precise. You can't hide. Tomorrow, I'll be closer. I dropped the phone. My hands shook uncontrollably. And then, a slow, deliberate realization settled in my chest. They weren't just playing games, they were controlling me, testing my fear, mapping my reactions, and I was falling right into their hands. I knew I had to act. I couldn't just wait for them to strike, but every move I considered was fraught with danger. Every plan I drafted in my head carried risk. I had no allies I could trust, no one who could protect me, and yet, I couldn't freeze. Not now, not when the stakes were this high. So I stayed awake all night, flashlight at my side, eyes trained on the shadows outside my window. Every noise, every flicker of light, every shift in the dark made me flinch. I was trapped in my own apartment, a prisoner in the place that was supposed to be safe. And all the while, the sense of being watched, measured, anticipated, gnawed at my mind. By morning, exhaustion had made me sharp in ways fear alone could not. I realized one thing clearly. I had to turn the game around. I couldn't let them control me. I couldn't let them see me broken. I would follow the trail they left. I would decipher their messages, and I would find out who they were before they struck again. Little did I know, this decision to fight, to move, to act would set me on a path more dangerous, more shocking, and more relentless than anything I had ever imagined. And the next clue, the next shadow, the next threat, was waiting just around the corner. Morning light seeped through the blinds, but it did nothing to ease the storm inside me. I felt hollow, drained, and yet every nerve screamed at me to keep moving. I couldn't stay in my apartment another minute longer, yet stepping outside felt like walking straight into a trap. I paced, my phone clutched tight, remembering the messages. You're not alone. Tomorrow, I'll be closer. The word, tomorrow, twisted in my stomach like a knife. Whoever was doing this didn't just watch me, they planned. And they had patience, I didn't. I decided the first step was to gather proof, evidence, anything that could help me understand them. My laptop became my lifeline. I combed through every email, every social media message, every transaction. At first, nothing stood out, but then, a pattern emerged. Subtle, almost invisible, small gaps in my notifications, strange logins from unknown locations, accounts I had barely used being pinged. My blood ran cold. Whoever this was had been inside my digital life as carefully as they had been in my physical one. I knew I couldn't do this alone. I needed someone who could help, someone I could trust with my life, but trust was scarce. Friends were busy, my family too far away, and anyone I told might become another target. My instincts screamed at me. Choose wisely, or risk everything. I called my best friend, Mark. His voice, calm and steady, was the first thing that didn't make me flinch that morning. I explained, slowly, carefully, what had been happening. He listened, no interruptions, no disbelief. Only after I finished did he say, we'll handle this, step by step. You're not alone in this, Alec. That gave me a sliver of hope. Together, we planned, cameras, trackers, backups, every precaution we could take. I learned quickly that every device I touched, every app I opened, might already be monitored. Paranoia became my constant companion, but Mark's presence grounded me. We stayed up all day, reviewing footage, cross-referencing logs, and analyzing patterns. And then we saw it, a shadow in the background of a video. Someone slipping through my building's stairwell just minutes after I had left. The figure was too vague to identify, but the timing was precise, almost mocking. Fear and anger collided inside me. This wasn't random. Whoever this was knew exactly what I was doing, and they were daring me to challenge them. I could feel their game tightening, like a noose around my neck, and I realized something else there. Patience was their weapon. They weren't rushing. They were making me anxious, predictable, reckless. Every move I made, every reaction, was feeding them. That evening, I made the decision to leave my apartment. Staying would make me predictable, easy to trap. With Mark's help, we moved my essentials to a safe house he knew about. The air outside hit me like fire, my senses heightened, every noise and shadow suspicious. It was terrifying, but I refused to show weakness. Every step, every glance over my shoulder, reminded me that someone was always there, always watching, always waiting. At the safe house, I finally allowed myself to breathe. Briefly, it wasn't long before a knock on the door shattered the illusion of safety. My heart leaped to my throat. Mark moved to the door cautiously, checking through the peephole. No one was there, only a small envelope taped to the doorstep. I hesitated, then picked it up. Inside was a single photograph: Mark's car parked outside my apartment the night before. Whoever this was, they weren't just targeting me anymore, they were tracking everyone around me. I felt rage, fear, and helplessness, all at once. I wanted to scream, to run, to disappear entirely, but I couldn't. I was tethered to this nightmare by the invisible thread of my own fear, by the predator who had chosen me. I realized that the game was no longer just survival, it was about uncovering the truth, and surviving long enough to do it. We spent hours that night scanning every security camera, reviewing every angle of my apartment, and planning contingencies. Each clue I found, each subtle hint of movement, added to the horrifying realization: this person was meticulous, strategic, and patient to an almost inhuman degree. Every shadow became a potential threat, every sound a warning. Sleep was impossible, food tasteless, and my mind constantly racing. And then came the call. My phone rang, a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer, but something inside told me I had to. The voice on the other end was calm, chilling, and completely familiar, though I didn't recognize it. "You're getting closer, Alec, but are you ready to see what's really waiting for you?" The line went dead before I could respond. My hands shook uncontrollably, my mind racing with questions and fear. Whoever this was had been watching, listening, planning, and now they wanted to escalate. I realized that running wasn't enough, hiding wasn't enough. I needed to confront this head on, to understand them before they made their next move. I couldn't let fear paralyze me, had to use it. I had to track, anticipate, and outsmart someone who had been 2 steps ahead for weeks. Mark and I created a detailed plan for the next day: monitor all possible routes, set traps for anyone entering, and record every possible angle. We stayed awake all night, but exhaustion wasn't an option. Every sound, every shadow, every flicker of light could be the clue that would either save me or doom me. By the time dawn broke, I felt a terrifying mix of clarity and dread. The predator wasn't just a stranger, they were smart, relentless, and patient. And I had to be smarter, faster, and more relentless. Every step I took now, every choice I made, carried weight. Every moment could be my last. I knew one undeniable truth: the next encounter, the next clue, the next confrontation, it wouldn't just test my courage, it would test my sanity. And deep inside, I sensed that the revelations ahead would be more shocking, more twisted, and more personal than anything I could have imagined. The day had only begun, and already, I was fully awake to the nightmare that had chosen me. I had no idea what was coming, only that the next move would define whether I survived or whether I became just another shadow in someone else's game. The first rays of sunlight barely warmed the cold, tense air of the safe house. My body ached from the restless night, but exhaustion wasn't something I could afford. Every muscle screamed at me to collapse, yet my mind was sharper than it had ever been. Painfully aware that the predator was watching, calculating, waiting for a slip. Mark had been pacing, muttering to himself about patterns, logs, and possible escape routes, but I couldn't focus on his words. All I could feel was the weight of the photograph, Mark's car outside my apartment, and the realization that this wasn't just about me anymore, it was about everyone connected to me. We decided to map everything: every camera, every blind spot, every possible entrance and exit in the area surrounding the safe house. I marked everything on a whiteboard with red markers, circling, connecting, obsessing over angles. Whoever was doing this had a level of precision that made my head spin. It was no longer random. They were surgical, patient, and cruel. My stomach churned at the thought that they might have been planning this for months, watching my routines, memorizing my habits. By mid-morning, we tried to establish a lure, something that might force a reaction. Mark suggested leaving my phone in a decoy bag while we monitored its movements. I hated the idea of being bait, hated the thought of putting myself at risk intentionally. But deep down I knew it was the only way to learn more. With my hands shaking, I prepared the bag, my mind running through every possible outcome. Whoever was behind this wasn't just targeting me, they were playing a game designed to break me, piece by piece. We hid in a corner of the safe house. Cameras trained on the street outside. Hours passed slowly, every second stretching like a taut wire ready to snap. Then, movement. A figure, hooded and deliberate, approached the decoy bag, circling it, examining it, as if smelling a trap. My heart pounded violently in my chest. I could see the meticulous care in every step, the calm patience that was impossible to ignore. Whoever this was, they were confident, to calm. I wanted to scream, to run, to throw myself at them, but I stayed frozen, gripping Mark's hand for support. The figure paused, crouched, examined the bag, and then stepped back. Not stolen, not touched, just testing me, testing us. I could feel rage and fear collide in my chest. This was personal. Whoever this was didn't just want to scare me, they wanted to control me, break me mentally, turn me into prey without even touching me. By nightfall, my nerves were frayed. Every creak of the house, every flicker of the streetlights felt like a signal, a warning, or a trap. I barely ate, barely moved, barely slept. And then came the second message, typed, clear, and taunting. You think you're ready? I'm closer than you imagine. My hands trembled as I read the words. This wasn't just a warning anymore. This was proof that they were inside my world in ways I couldn't comprehend. We decided the next step had to be aggressive. We needed to trace the call, track the location, get any piece of evidence that could expose them. It felt reckless, terrifying, and necessary. Every strategy we devised, every precaution we took, I felt their presence looming, mocking me from the shadows. It was exhausting. And yet, deep inside, a fire started to burn. If I didn't fight back now, I'd be consumed entirely. Late at night, Mark set up a small network of surveillance cameras, and I reviewed old footage I hadn't seen before. That's when I noticed the tiny details I had missed. A reflection in a window, a shadow in a doorway, subtle movements outside the frame. Whoever this was had a signature, a pattern. And finally, I saw a glimmer of their identity, not clear enough to be certain, but enough to know they were someone I had crossed paths with before. Someone I knew, maybe trusted. The realization froze me in place, and my chest tightened as I whispered to myself, it can't be, but it is. Sleep was impossible. Every noise, every shadow, every passing car felt like an alert, a signal, a threat. I barely recognized myself in the mirror, pale haunted eyes staring back at me, but I couldn't let fear paralyze me. I had to keep moving, thinking, anticipating. Whoever this was had underestimated my will to survive, underestimated my need to fight back, and that would be their mistake. By dawn, I made a decision. I couldn't just wait, couldn't just hide. I had to step into the shadows myself, learn their game, and confront the person who had turned my life into a nightmare. I felt every emotion, fear, anger, determination, but more than anything, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in weeks. This was no longer about surviving. It was about taking control of the story, rewriting the rules, and facing the darkness head-on. Mark supported me, though I could see his worry. Are you sure about this? He asked, voice low, tense. I nodded, knowing that hesitation could cost everything. Every plan we had, every detail we mapped, led to this point. Stepping out of safety, stepping into the unknown, to face someone who had been orchestrating every moment of my terror. And then, as I prepared to leave the safe house, my phone buzzed. Another message, short, simple, chilling. Tonight, Alec, don't disappoint me. My stomach twisted, my hands shook, but I didn't cry, didn't falter. This was the moment that defined me. Fear had a name, a face, and a schedule, and I was going to meet it, whether it wanted me to or not. I took a deep breath, braced myself, and stepped outside. The night was alive with danger, quiet but watchful, as if the streets themselves were holding their breath. Every step I took echoed, every shadow danced, and every moment reminded me that this game was far from over. Whoever was behind this had chosen me, but I wasn't their puppet. I was ready to fight, ready to uncover the truth, ready to survive, and maybe, just maybe, to strike back. The city streets were alive with shadows, each one whispering secrets I didn't want to hear. My pulse raced, but I kept moving, my steps careful, calculated. Every corner, every alley felt like a potential trap. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was always just behind me, breathing in sync with my fear. The message on my phone burned in my mind. Tonight, Alec, don't disappoint me. I wanted to throw the phone away, smash it against the pavement, anything to silence the threat, but I knew better. It was a lifeline, a twisted invitation, and I had no choice but to follow it. I reached the meeting point Mark had scouted, an abandoned parking garage that smelled of damp concrete and rust. The place was eerily silent, except for the occasional drip of water echoing through the cavernous space. I held my breath, every nerve on fire, every sense sharpened. Whoever had been tormenting me wasn't just close, they were watching, studying, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. My body wanted to flee, but my mind told me I couldn't. I had to see this through. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, hooded, deliberate, moving like a predator in slow motion. My heart jumped, my stomach churned, and a cold dread washed over me. I knew this person, knew their movements, their presence. Recognition hit like a blow to the chest. It was someone I had trusted, someone I had laughed with, someone who had smiled in my face while plotting this nightmare. Betrayal wrapped around me like a vice, and I had to fight to keep my legs from giving out. Why? I whispered, barely audible, my voice trembling. The figure stopped, a pause that felt like an eternity. Then the hood fell back, and there it was, the face I never expected to see again, twisted in a cruel smile. The realization shattered me. Everything, every moment, every scare had been them all along. Someone I knew, someone I had let into my life, had turned it into a nightmare. Rage, fear, disbelief, they collided in my chest, making it hard to breathe. They stepped closer, slow, deliberate, as if enjoying my shock, my horror. You always think you're in control, Alec, they said, voice smooth, taunting. But control is an illusion, and you've been nothing but my entertainment. Every word cut deeper than I could have imagined. I felt the world tilt, everything I believed in crumbling beneath me. But even in the face of betrayal, I knew I couldn't freeze. I had to fight. I had to survive. I lunged instinctively, grabbing a metal pipe from the side, swinging with every ounce of adrenaline I had. They dodged, effortlessly, almost teasingly, but it gave me a moment, just a fraction to assess, to understand. This person wasn't just strong, they were smart, methodical, calculated. The months of fear, the relentless stalking, the messages, the traps, it had all been preparation. And now, it was personal. The struggle became a blur of movement, shouts, and clashing metal. I wasn't just fighting for my life anymore, I was fighting for my dignity, my sanity, the right to reclaim my world from someone who had stolen it. Every strike, every step, every breath carried the weight of betrayal, anger, and desperation. My arms ached, my muscles screamed, but I couldn't stop. I wouldn't stop. Suddenly, they pulled back, holding a small device I didn't recognize. Step closer, they said, their voice calm, almost seductive in its menace. I want you to see everything, Alec. I want you to feel it. My stomach dropped. I realized then that this wasn't just about terror, it was about humiliation, control, and making me helpless. But as fear clawed at my chest, a spark of defiance ignited. I refused to be their pawn. I refused to be broken. I lunged again, swinging the pipe with everything I had. The device fell, skittering across the concrete floor, and I seized the chance, tackling them to the ground. For a moment, the fight froze, our faces inches apart, hearts pounding, breaths ragged. Why me? I demanded, voice shaking with fury. Why destroy everything? They smirked, a dark glint in their eyes. Because you mattered. Because the closer you think you are, the harder it falls. Pain is beauty, Alec, and you've been exquisite. The words burned into me, but they also fueled something deeper, something stronger. I realized then that I couldn't just survive. I had to end this, not just for me, but for the life they had tried to ruin. For every moment of peace they had stolen. Mark's voice crackled in my earpiece. Alec, backup's here. Don't let them slip. The sound of reinforcements gave me strength, a renewed focus. I pushed, kicked, swung, using everything I had learned from months of fear, training myself to anticipate, to counter, to fight back. And slowly, painstakingly, I gained control. They stumbled, faltered, and for the first time, I saw weakness in their calculated facade. When the police finally arrived, it was over in minutes. They took the figure away, handcuffed, shouting, defeated. and I stood in the garage, trembling, drenched in sweat and relief. But the relief was fleeting, tempered by exhaustion and the lingering sting of betrayal. I had survived, yes, but at a cost. The world I knew had been shattered, the people I trusted proven capable of unspeakable cruelty, and my sense of safety gone. Yet amidst the chaos, amidst the betrayal and terror, a small, stubborn flame of defiance remained. I had faced the nightmare, stared into its face, and walked out alive. I had reclaimed a piece of control, a piece of power that no one could ever take again. But the scars, mental, emotional, and physical, would stay with me forever, a constant reminder that the world could be dark, cruel, and relentless. I walked out of the garage into the cold night, the city quiet but alive. Every shadow felt less threatening now, every breath less suffocating. I wasn't the same Alec who had been trapped in fear just hours ago. I was stronger, sharper, and more aware than ever. And though the nightmare had ended for now, I knew this was only the beginning of a longer journey, a journey to heal, to rebuild, and to never allow anyone to take control of my life again. The night after the arrest, I couldn't sleep. Every shadow in my apartment seemed to move, every creak of the floorboards made my heart lurch. I kept the lights on, but even the brightness couldn't chase away the memories, the face of betrayal, the twisted smile, the way they had toyed with me like I was nothing more than a puppet. I tried to tell myself it was over, that the nightmare had ended, but deep inside, I knew better. The danger had passed, yes, but the damage, the fear, the distrust, it wasn't something that could be so easily erased. Mark insisted I stay at his place for a few days, saying I needed to recover, but I felt trapped there too. The walls felt too small, the silence too loud. Every time the phone rang, my heart skipped, expecting another threat. Every time a stranger passed by the window, I flinched. It was exhausting, terrifying, and humiliating all at once. And yet, amidst the fear, a determination began to build. I refused to let this person, this shadow of terror, define the rest of my life. I had survived, and now I needed to reclaim everything they had tried to take. I started digging into their past, every article, every social media post, every digital footprint I could find. I wanted to understand them, understand why they had targeted me, and the more I uncovered, the more horrifying it became. They weren't just dangerous, they were meticulous, obsessive, and had done this before. I wasn't the first, and tragically, I wouldn't be the last. The thought made my skin crawl, but it also strengthened my resolve. I couldn't allow them to manipulate anyone else. I had to expose the truth. Days turned into nights, and nights into endless research sessions. Mark tried to pull me away, insisting I needed rest, but I couldn't stop. Every connection, every link, every lead I followed brought me closer to understanding the mind behind the chaos. And then, buried in an old forum post, I found it, something they had missed, something I could use, a detail so small, so easily overlooked, but powerful enough to unravel the careful persona they had built. I felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a sense of control. I wasn't just a victim anymore, I was a force to be reckoned with. But the realization came with a warning. If they discovered what I had found, the consequences could be catastrophic. My mind raced with plans, precautions, strategies. Every step had to be calculated, every move precise. One wrong decision, and all the progress I had made could vanish in an instant. Then came the threats, not on the phone, not through messages, but subtle, creeping signs that they were aware, that they were still watching. A car parked too long outside my building, a shadow that lingered in the reflection of my window, a sudden chill when I walked down the hallway. It was a psychological game, and they were masters of it, but I refused to give in. I couldn't. The stakes were too high, and my resolve too strong. One night, while reviewing their online activity, I noticed a pattern, a connection between their old accounts, their movements, and certain events that had always seemed random. My heart raced as I realized this pattern could lead me to them, could give me leverage, could end this nightmare permanently. I called Mark, and together we mapped it out, step by step, careful not to leave traces that could be traced back to me. Every detail mattered. Every hesitation could cost me dearly. The weeks that followed were a blur of tension and strategy. I felt like I was living two lives, one in the daylight, pretending everything was normal, and one in the shadows, obsessively tracking, analyzing, plotting. I barely slept, barely ate, but I was alive in a way I hadn't been before. Focused, dangerous. The girl who had been terrorized, who had trembled at every sound, was slowly becoming someone else, someone sharper, someone vigilant, someone prepared. But with every revelation came another shock. Evidence emerged that the person I thought I had known, the person I trusted, had accomplices, allies hidden in plain sight, friends, colleagues, strangers who had helped orchestrate parts of the nightmare without me realizing. The betrayal ran deeper than I had imagined, and the labyrinth of manipulation stretched farther than I could have anticipated. The realization was crushing, but I refused to collapse under it. I had survived worse. I had to go deeper. Then, just when I thought I had a handle on the situation, I received a message, simple and chilling. You think you're done. You've only seen the surface. My blood ran cold. They were still out there. They had planned for contingencies, for survival, for this very moment. My stomach twisted, my pulse spiked, but beneath the terror, a spark of defiance burned brighter than ever. They underestimated me. They always had, and I was ready to show them exactly what that meant. That night, I stared at my reflection in the mirror, tracing the lines of exhaustion on my face, the shadows under my eyes. Fear was still there, yes, but alongside it was power, knowledge, a relentless drive that wouldn't allow me to be anyone's victim again. The road ahead would be treacherous, the fight far from over, but I had survived the worst they could throw at me. And now, armed with the truth, armed with strategy, armed with every ounce of courage I had left, I was ready to hunt, ready to expose, ready to reclaim my life, no matter the cost. Chapter 6 ended with the bitter understanding that the nightmare wasn't over, that shadows still lurked, and that survival was only the beginning. But Alex's transformation, from prey to fighter, had begun, and nothing would stop her from finishing what had started. I never imagined that a single phone call could change everything again. I was sitting in my apartment, trying to convince myself that the nightmare was over, that the shadows had finally retreated, when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with an unknown number. My heart dropped before I even answered. "Hello," I whispered, my voice trembling. There was silence at first, and then a familiar, cold tone that sent shivers down my spine. "You think you're safe, Alec?" The voice was sharp, deliberate. I froze. It was him, the person who had been watching me all this time. I had thought I had escaped. I had thought I was free. I was wrong. The days that followed were a blur. Strange emails, cryptic messages, packages left at my door with no return address. Every shadow in my apartment felt alive. Every stranger's glance felt like a threat. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't think. I barely ate. My friends tried to reach me, but I pushed them away. I couldn't explain this. How could I explain that someone had invaded my life in ways I couldn't even comprehend? I started noticing patterns, small details I had ignored before. The same car parked outside my building multiple times. The same footsteps echoing behind me when I left work. The same unfamiliar number appearing in my call log. He was patient. He was calculating. And worst of all, he was clever. Every move I made to escape him seemed anticipated, almost like he was reading my mind. One night, I decided to take a risk. I traced the emails, the messages, even the subtle clues left in my apartment. Each lead pointed to the same thing, a place in the outskirts of the city, abandoned and hidden from the public eye. My gut screamed at me to leave it alone, to run. But something inside me, the part that refused to be victimized again, forced me forward. I had to know. I had to confront this. I arrived at the location under the cover of night. The building was old, deserted, its windows like dark, watching eyes. I stepped inside, every creak of the floorboards echoing in the hollow space. My heart pounded in my chest. I could feel the presence of someone else, someone waiting. And then I saw him, not hiding, not running. He was standing in the shadows, calm, patient, almost amused. "You shouldn't have come here," he said, his voice low but cutting. "But I admire your courage. Or is it desperation?" I gritted my teeth, refusing to show fear. "I'm done running. I won't be your victim." My voice was stronger than I felt. He stepped forward slowly, as if each move was calculated to break me mentally before anything else. The confrontation that night changed everything. It wasn't violent, not yet, but the tension, the control, the power struggle, it was suffocating. I realized I had underestimated him. He knew me, my fears, my weaknesses, and I had only one choice: to outsmart him, to fight back with every ounce of strength, wit, and courage I had left. I left that building with a plan forming in my mind, I wouldn't let him win. He had taken so much from me already, the peace I had fought for, my sense of safety, my sanity at times, but I would reclaim it, slowly, deliberately. Every step he thought he controlled, I would turn against him. He had underestimated me before. Never again. That night, as I locked my apartment door behind me, I felt something I hadn't in weeks. Determination. Fear was still there, lingering in the edges of my thoughts, but it was no longer paralyzing. I was no longer just running. I was preparing, I was awake, and I was ready for whatever he had planned next. I couldn't sleep that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw his face, that calm, unnerving expression, like he knew exactly what I was thinking. I kept replaying our encounter in that abandoned building over and over, analyzing every word, every movement, trying to find a weakness, anything I could use against him. My mind refused rest, and neither would my body, not while he was still out there, still watching. The next morning, I decided to start gathering information. I went through every message he had sent me, every package, every detail of his game. I was meticulous, tracing patterns, analyzing timing, locations, even the way he phrased his words. There was a rhythm to him, a method in the madness, and I was determined to decode it. I had to. Every small clue was a lifeline, and I clung to each one like my life depended on it because it did. I contacted an old friend from work, someone who had skills I desperately needed but whom I hadn't trusted before. I explained everything, careful not to sound frantic, but to convey the seriousness. When he agreed to help, a weight lifted off my shoulders, but it was replaced immediately by a deeper dread. I realized that bringing someone else into this meant I was exposing them to danger, too. Every ally I sought could become another pawn in his twisted game. Days turned into nights as we tracked his movements. He left traces, small but consistent. A familiar car parked near my building, a new message timed precisely when I was most vulnerable. A shadow glimpsed in the corner of my eye when I walked alone at night. It was exhausting, terrifying, and yet I felt a strange, dark satisfaction in knowing I could follow him, learn him, anticipate him. For the first time, I felt like I was fighting back on my own terms, and then it happened. A breakthrough. A small, seemingly insignificant detail, a receipt from a cafe, a timestamp that didn't match his supposed location, led us to a hidden trail of places he frequented. I couldn't believe it. After months of fear, months of running and hiding, we had a thread, a fragile, delicate thread that could lead to the truth. My pulse raced as I stared at the evidence. Finally, I had a way in. The next challenge was approaching him without alerting him that I knew. I spent nights planning, rehearsing my movements, my words, my exits, every eventuality mapped out in excruciating detail. It was like preparing for a battle where the enemy had eyes everywhere. Every wrong step could cost me more than just my pride, it could cost my life. And yet, I couldn't stop. I had to confront him. I had to end this. I chose the cafe he was known to visit. I sat at a corner table, blending in with the crowd, pretending to read, pretending to be just another customer. But my eyes never left the door. Minutes stretched into hours, each one heavier than the last. And then he appeared, calm, composed, almost casual, as if nothing had ever happened between us. My stomach twisted, my chest tightened, and I forced myself to stay still, to remain unnoticed. He didn't acknowledge me at first. He moved with that same precision, scanning the room, analyzing everything like a predator sizing up its prey. And then he looked directly at me, his eyes locked onto mine, and I felt that same chilling power he always carried. But this time, it felt different. This time, I didn't feel small. This time, I felt ready. I knew he noticed my confidence, or at least my attempt at it. The tension was unbearable, thick enough to choke on. Every second felt like an eternity as I watched him sit at a table across the room, pretending to be unaware, but calculating, always calculating. I realized in that moment that the real game wasn't about fear anymore. It was about control, strategy, and patience. And I was determined not to let him control me. I began subtly testing him. Small gestures, minor provocations, gauging his reactions. He responded with slight shifts in posture, a fleeting smirk, almost imperceptible, but it was there. I was reading him as he read me. The cafe became a battlefield of glances, movements, and unspoken challenges. I couldn't believe how much power could be exchanged without a single word spoken. Suddenly, my phone buzzed and my Pokita message timed perfectly to distract me. I resisted the urge to check it, forcing my attention back to him. But the message was a warning, a reminder that he knew I was onto him, that he could reach me anytime, anywhere. My hands shook, and my heart pounded, but I didn't let it show. I had to maintain my composure. Any slip, any sign of weakness, could undo everything I had worked for. Hours later, when he left, I followed him from a safe distance, keeping 2 shadows, never letting him see me. Every step he took, I recorded, memorized, and mapped. I was learning him, understanding his patterns, discovering his vulnerabilities, and with every step, my fear transformed into something sharper, determination, a resolve to finally end this nightmare. By the time I returned home that night, exhausted and shaking, I knew one thing for certain. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was preparing to fight back. I had seen him vulnerable. I had seen him make mistakes, and I had learned his rhythm. I realized the power had shifted slightly, just slightly, but it was enough to give me hope, enough to make me feel that maybe, just maybe, I could win. I sat alone in my dark apartment, staring at the evidence laid out in front of me, every photo, every message, every trace of his presence carefully catalogued. I whispered to myself, "This ends soon. I will not be his victim." The words tasted like fire in my mouth, bitter and burning but liberating at the same time. The hunt was no longer just his. The hunter had become the hunted, and I was ready to strike when the time came. Chapter 8 ends with me staring at the city skyline through my window. The night cold and silent. I felt a sense of grim determination I had never felt before. The pieces were finally coming together. I could feel the storm building, the inevitable confrontation approaching, and deep down, I knew that nothing would ever be the same after what was about to happen. I knew the moment had come. Every second, every clue, every painstaking step I had taken had led to this. My hands trembled not with fear, but with a raw, desperate anticipation. I had followed him long enough, studied him, tracked him, and now I had the upper hand. It was my turn to set the trap, to end this nightmare once and for all. The location was perfect, an abandoned warehouse on the outskirts of the city. A place where no one could see or hear us. I had scouted it, memorized every corner, every shadow, every potential escape route. He arrived exactly as predicted, moving with that same eerie calm, unaware that I had already anticipated his every step. I stayed in the shadows, my heart hammering in my chest, reminding me that every second counted. When he stepped inside, I called out softly, "I know what you've been doing." His head snapped toward me, surprise flickering for the first time, quickly replaced by that cold, unnerving smile. He thought he was still in control, still untouchable, but he had underestimated me. He didn't know how much I had learned, how much I had prepared. He didn't know that I was no longer just running, I was hunting. I moved closer, my eyes locked on his, and I could see the slightest tension in his posture, the smallest sign of uncertainty. I pressed, inching forward, confronting him with every truth I had discovered, every lie he had told, every plan he had executed against me. His expression shifted, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of fear, but it was subtle, fleeting, and I had to act fast before he regained control. He lunged suddenly, attempting to surprise me, but I was ready. Every instinct, every hour of preparation, every moment of fear and adrenaline merged into a single action. I dodged, countered, and forced him back against the wall. The struggle was brief but intense. He was strong, but I was relentless. Every shove, every push, every maneuver I had practiced in my mind countless times became real. And in that moment, I realized that fear had transformed into power, and I had become unstoppable. I pinned him down, holding him against the cold concrete floor. His eyes were wide now, no longer calm, no longer unshakable. I whispered his name, and the silence between us was suffocating. The man who had haunted my nights, invaded my mind, and threatened my life was finally at my mercy. And yet, even as I stood victorious, I felt a strange, hollow emptiness. The fear, the anxiety, the relentless pursuit it had defined me. And now, it was gone. I forced him to confess everything, every twisted motive, every calculated move he had made. And as he spoke, I felt a mix of horror and vindication. I realized how close I had come to losing everything, not just my life, but my sense of self. But now, standing over him, I understood that surviving him wasn't enough. I had to reclaim my life, my freedom, and my power. I left him there, restrained and exposed. A warning to anyone who might think they could ever control me. I didn't gloat. I didn't savor his defeat. Instead, I walked out into the cold night, breathing deeply, feeling the weight of months of fear lift off my shoulders. Every step I took was a declaration. I was no longer a victim. I was Alec Rose, and I had fought back. The aftermath was both terrifying and liberating. I had to rebuild, reconnect, and reclaim the parts of myself that had been stolen by fear. Every shadow, every whisper, every lingering doubt became a reminder of my strength. I knew I could never forget, and perhaps I would always carry the scars of what had happened. But I also knew that I had survived, and survival had transformed me into someone stronger, sharper, and more fearless than I had ever been before. Even now, as I tell this story, my heart races thinking of him, thinking of how close I had come to being consumed. But I also know that every step, every choice, every moment of terror had led me here to truth, to clarity, to power. I survived because I refused to let fear define me. I survived because I was willing to fight, to learn, and to act when it mattered most. And so, the nightmare ended, but the lesson remained. Trust is fragile, fear is real, and sometimes, the only way to reclaim your life is to face the darkness head-on, even when every instinct screams to run. I faced it, I fought it, and I won. Now, when I look at the city skyline, I see more than shadows. I see possibility. I see freedom. I see myself not as a girl hunted, but as a woman who survived. A survivor who would never again allow someone else to control her fate. The echoes of fear may linger, but the fire inside me burns brighter, and that fire will never be extinguished.